Siren FM.
Well, unless you've actually been in hibernation over the last few years, you may have actually noticed that there's been a change in our relationship with the European Union, at least as far as Britain's concerned. And clearly, as I know from experience talking to students up and down the country, there's been a concern about what they're going to do, how they're going to get together. In fact, a recent survey suggested that something like 12% have actually given up on their dream of working abroad. So let's talk about whether it is still feasible to indeed work abroad, and who better to do that than the Amsterdam managing partner of DMCG Global. That's the wonderful Natasha Stark. How are you, Natasha?
I'm very well, thank you, Alex.
Excellent. Now, let's get to the nub of this to start off with. Is working abroad still possible, or is it a case of, no, we can't do that now, we're all Brexited?
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a lot of concern about that, and I speak to a lot of people every day on that topic. So every country has its own laws on that now, and I think entry requirements have changed, and that's important to remember. However, there are still a lot of job opportunities in the EU, and I think that one of the most important things that we've seen is learning a language also really helps your chances of getting those jobs. So yeah.
I know within the higher educational sector, Erasmus was a fantastic scheme, and that's just got another year or so to run before it effectively comes out and ceases to be in place. There'll hopefully be others that will be replacing it. But it is important, I would have thought, for an individual's development to have that cultural aspect of being able to quite freely work in other European countries as well, really.
Yeah, I think if that's your dream, you really need to be able to speak the native language of the country. It really helps with conversations. I mean, I myself have been in Amsterdam for 7 years, and my 4-year-old is now at school. And I know that certainly learning some Dutch helps. We're very lucky because they speak English here. But, in other European countries such as Spain, you definitely do need to start learning that language before you think about moving, I'd say. And I think there's quite a lot of resources. I do recommend Rosetta Stone quite a lot to people because that's quite a useful course.
Well, this is exactly where we wanted to progress on to, because clearly we could go back to the days, presumably, of the early 20th century, the 19th century, where it was generally felt that if you were British, as long as you spoke loudly and slowly, any nation could actually understand you. I think those days are probably gone. In terms of popularity, Spanish, I find, from the survey, is probably the most popular language. Is that because of the sun, do you think?
I think almost definitely. I think that it really depends which country. We're quite lucky here in Amsterdam because English is spoken really as a second language. You've got TV adverts in English, you've got international companies. Spain still does have international companies where business English is spoken quite widely. However, it is a Spanish-speaking country, and you do need to learn that if you want to get by, I think, conversationally. It also helps just embed yourself into the culture more, and certainly will help with job prospects.
So I was intrigued in terms of popularity of countries. Italy, France and Greece are the next up. I was surprised not to see Germany actually in that, and indeed Holland. I thought they might have actually been scoring higher, and possibly Belgium as well.
Yeah, I mean, just certainly because, you can speak English here in the Netherlands. But yeah, I think the weather does have quite a lot to do with it. I think maybe it's southern France, isn't it?
Well, I suppose if you're going to work anywhere, why not go to Cannes and just sort of work on that process?
Exactly.
In terms of considering employability overseas and so on, I know we've talked quite glibly over the years about it's a global market now, and the internet has brought us all together, and you don't need to travel and so on. But what advice would you have, Natasha, for somebody who might be thinking, well, actually, yeah, I'd quite like to work overseas, actually physically as opposed to remotely?
Well, we have seen a huge increase in remote working for sure. But, if you do want to travel and you do want to be abroad while you work, then I think that is also the opportunities have increased certainly there. You can be in one location one day, and if you don't have a family, you're pretty free to go as long as you've got that visa. And that's important to check the government websites for those as well, because obviously restrictions have kind of been put in. But I think, there are still companies that we're certainly talking to across Europe that do physically want those people to be in those cities. Because I think, we will return eventually to some sort of office-based working, whether that's shared spaces or not.
Yes, and the review, I mean, you're ideally placed being in Holland. I mean, the perspective of receiving requests for employment from British folk, etc., possibly sort of saying, we've had enough of the British Isles, we want to move to X, Y, or Z country, and so on. Is it something that you think actually there is a recruitment process here that's working through that? Is it a fact that actually, despite some of the political shenanigans that have been going on, there's still a kind of bond that connects us as human beings across the planet?
I would really hope so. I think restriction of movement is always a really difficult thing for people to deal with. And we all obviously we want to be free to do what we want to do in our lives. I think that with obviously Brexit, the EU has put in sort of a blanket, highly skilled migrant entry requirements for most of those countries. So you will need to check on those individually to see what those requirements are. But yeah, I mean, it's all readily available. So, just a Google search will help with that.
And just on that point, Natasha, in terms of improving your employability for companies that are actually abroad, I mean, language clearly you mentioned is a fairly critical one from that point of view. Are there any other sort of aspects that people should be considering?
I mean, upskilling for any role that you go for is really important. I would say look at your industry, look at how things are developing. Certainly, gain digital skills if that's needed. All of that is developing now really, really quickly, certainly over the last year. I think we've all adapted pretty well, actually, as humans. But yeah, certainly that aspect of it. And yeah, again, you mentioned language, and I think that's really, really key.
And from your own experience in Holland, Natasha, any regrets about the last 7 years, or is it a case of no, this is the Dutch way is the best way?
I really love it here. I love the lifestyle. Everything feels easy, I have to say. There's obviously the Dutch tax system to deal with, which has its own issues, but no, generally it's a really good work-life balance for sure.
And finally, would you recommend rosettastone.co.uk as the best launching off points to actually at least start improving languages?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good online resource, and it's one that I know people have actually stuck to, which is also important.
And just out of interest, when you first started learning Dutch as well, Natasha, was it something which you thought, well, no, I won't use the line, was it all double Dutch to you? No, of course not. But was it something which basically you sort of felt, actually, it's just kind of getting into the rhythm of speaking Dutch?
Yeah, and being surrounded by people that speak it, and also if your 4-year-old speaking Dutch to you, you're gonna want to learn it more, aren't you? But yeah, I think as I said, we're quite lucky here because everybody speaks English, which in some ways makes language learning harder. But yeah.
And also, I've often found with respect to Dutch folk, there always tends to be a slight American sort of inclination with respect to English when Dutch people speak it. I don't know. It's just maybe it's just.
No, that's very true. I think international schools, when you speak to people from an international school, they do have that slight slant, and I think that's how we learn languages from kind of whether it's from films or popular culture, and a lot of people in that popular culture have American accents, so that's why.
Absolutely. Anyway, Natasha, it's been fantastic sharing some thoughts with your good self today. A reminder, it's rosettastone.co.uk to at least start improving your language skills. We'll put those last two questions to you, Natasha. First of all, have you had a reasonably interesting Zoomer with us on the programme?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. This is good. It's a new form of vocabulary I thought I'd introduce. And can we prevail upon you to join us again? Will you come back sometime and keep us appraised of how life is going with DMCG Global and more?
I'd love to, Alex. Thank you.
Natasha Stark, Amsterdam Managing Partner for DMCG Global. Huge thanks and keep on keeping on.